You booked it, episode 64. Hey, entertainers and performers of the world. I'm your host, Dane Reese, and welcome to You Booked It, where I chat with inspiring entertainment professionals 7 days a week. By digging into their journey, we're going to discover everything you need to do to have a successful entertainment career. You know, because training usually skips that part about how to actually make your skills work for you in the real world. Fellow entertainers, my drive here at You Booked It is to share the inspiring and incredible journeys of successful entertainment professionals. We're here to support your journey. So go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join the You Booked It email community, where we dig deep into truly actionable things you can be doing right now to book that next audition, submission, or gig. If you enjoy this free podcast, please show your support and search for You Booked It on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app, where you can subscribe so you don't miss an episode, leave a rating, and review. And now, let's do this. Alrighty, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Stephen Petrovich. Are you ready for this, Stephen?
I am so ready. Thank you for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for being here. Stephen originated the role of Gangle in the North American premiere company of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Love Never Dies, playing in over 400 performances in 45 U.S. cities. He was most recently seen as Mr. Wormwood in Matilda at the Axelrod PAC. He has also reprised the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz at Kansas City Starlight, Theater by the Sea, and Moonlight Amphitheater. He toured with Beauty and the Beast, where he understudied Lumiere. Regional credits include North Shore, Arrow Rock Lyceum, West Virginia Public Theater, and MGR Playhouse. Some of his favorite roles include The Drowsy Chaperone, where he played Robert, Spamalot, Lacage, Hairspray 3 times, and 42nd Street. Stephen holds a BFA in musical theater from the Boston Conservatory. Stephen, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Fill in the gaps: who you are, where you're from, where you're currently calling home, and a little bit more about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry.
All right. I'm Steven. I grew up in Newtown, Connecticut, about 80 minutes outside of New York City. So was seeing a lot of Broadway shows and a lot of theater from a pretty formative age. Went to the Boston Conservatory, as you said in my bio, and I have lived in the greater New York area for about 10 years now. And I am currently back in my hometown in the house that I grew up in Connecticut, given the current socio-political climate. I've spent about 10 years in the city hustling as an actor, doing all kinds of other stuff in addition to auditioning and sort of studying and doing gigs. So it's been quite a decade.
Yeah, absolutely. And not a bad idea to be escaping Manhattan for the time being.
Yeah, no, definitely not missing out on too much there currently. Nothing's open.
Very true. All right, well, let's move on to this next section. And Stephen, look, I am a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote you'd like to share with everyone?
I really like the quote, "It's not a race, it's a marathon." I'm not sure if you've heard that one yet.
I haven't.
Yeah? Okay. It's a good one. I think it applies on like a micro and a sort of more of a macro level as well, just as an actor and also as a human kind of trying to navigate this life.
Absolutely. And can you dig into any specifics on how that's applied to your career thus far?
I think as an actor, it's definitely been interesting to observe the past decade of my work as a professional actor. And I think a lot of times coming out of a BFA program, there's a lot of preconceived notions about, what is the trajectory? How does it go when you're a young actor and you kind of dream of moving to New York and hitting auditions, and you assume, because you're told by your professors and they would lead you to believe that maybe if you don't book a Broadway show in the first 6 months of living in New York, that maybe you should reconsider. But actually, we know that it takes years and years to develop a career and to make contacts and to build any sort of work ethic. So it's definitely a longer term thing than just I just got here this morning and I came to slay. So
Absolutely. And those stories do exist, right? And that's why they bring them up, because people do straight away book a Broadway show right out of school or even before they
right.
graduate school. It happens, right?
Yeah, we definitely had a couple kids like that at the conservatory. So it's an interesting standard, that is set by the BFA program, but I don't think it's really a realistic example of how it goes for the majority of people.
Absolutely. And I think you said it right there. You said it's an interesting standard because the standard is actually the outlier that they're trying to. It doesn't make a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. Very true.
And it takes a lot of work. And most people, it takes time. And I would say for most people, we need that time to develop as artists, to develop our craft. And it's not to say that don't have the technical skill set, but there's all the other things that go into having a successful career
Absolutely.
that you just
Absolutely.
have to learn by doing.
Right. And living, for
Absolutely.
sure.
Well, let's move on to this section. And Stephen, of course, you're an entertainer. I am an entertainer. And I think that you'd agree that this industry is one of the most subjective, brutally honest, personally emotional industries either of us experienced. And you
Hmm.
know that to create and have a successful career in this industry like you're having now takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while, of course, there are outrageous times when we're having a lot of fun and excitement doing what we do, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures we are going to experience and we're going to have to move forward through. So tell
Hmm.
us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career, and how did you come out the other side better because of it?
Good question. I think that, again, coming out of a program like Boston Conservatory, where there is an emphasis that is placed on being the best triple threat technical performer that you can be, with sort of the brightest smile in the bunch, I feel like when I first came into the talent pool in New York, I had some preconceived notions about what kind of work I was going to pursue based on what my experience in my undergrad was. And I definitely was pursuing a lot of work as a chorus boy, trying to sort of assume this kind of perfect boy next door performer image that was someone that could very easily translate from project to project. And it didn't take me very long to realize that that wasn't really the most direct route towards getting any exposure. I think as I've matured in the industry, I realized a lot of my skills and my talents and the things that would set me apart from others in audition scenarios were actually very specific traits that actually helped me sort of discover a career as a character actor, which is actually not something that I necessarily learned how to do at the Boston Conservatory. There are definitely a lot of the comedy that I have employed and some of the silly voices that I've sort of had to pull out in auditions. And
Yeah.
yeah, there are definitely things that I was carrying with me, and I didn't realize someone would actually be interested in those kind of funny, authentic parts of yourself that weren't necessarily nurtured by the conservatory program. So, does that answer the question in
Yeah,
sort of a long winded
absolutely.
way?
Absolutely. And I think I love that you bring that up because in any kind of a training program, I mean, the Boston Conservatory is a small school, but there's still a lot of people in it. And they have to, logistically, for them to teach an entire program, they have to find some kind of middle ground standard for everyone, right?
Hmm.
And
Right.
us as individuals, or if you're going to put yourself into a training program like that or a conservatory program, to know that that's what they have to do And that's okay,
Hmm.
but to not discount your uniqueness and the things that make you you and the things that people would be attracted to because
Right.
only you can do them.
The artistry, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's move on to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time that you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living, or maybe it was, yes, this is what I need to be doing as an entertainer. Tell us about that.
Wow. I think the first time I really felt a deep resonance with the idea of pursuing acting as an actual career and a lifestyle, I think was, if I go all the way back, I think it was singing the role of Javert in my high school production of Les Mis. This was way back in like 2004. So it was around the time that they were first licensing the student edition of Les Miserables to schools, and it was a very big deal in our community that we were sort of putting on this huge show, and everybody was really, going for these iconic roles. And I was probably about 16, and I sang this really epic character, Javert, who is definitely not the first character that anyone would necessarily peg me for based on the rest of my body of work, which at that time I didn't really have a body of work. So but it was really a transformative experience, and it was a really hard sing. And I remember the praise that I received and the feedback that I got after that was definitely different than any other onstage experience, school play kind of, fan greetings that I had received up until then. And I knew that particular role was particularly weighty, and that there was more there, and that's sort of like where the artistry was, and I was really able to express the beginning of that in that character.
I love that. And would I be correct in saying when you went into that story, I had a memory pop up of watching a video of that, of you showing some people on a
Oh my
laptop,
gosh.
and it was,
Do you-
yeah, would that be correct that you have a video and the production was giant? I remember looking at it, you're like, oh, this is my high school. I was like, what? That's your high school?
You have an amazing memory. Yeah, I think I did. And there was another conservatory student named Matthew Grills, who was a voice
Absolutely.
major, but
Yes.
he went to my high school and he was in that production as well. And so I remember we showed that to our classmates, and it was a big production, and it was a huge undertaking for, I went to a public high school in Connecticut, so we didn't even necessarily have an arts program. But yeah, it was super formative and like so inspiring. I can honestly say years later, Les Mis, like I spent so much time with that material and learning that music. And it's very special to me. And I finally went the first time I traveled to London, I went and I saw it on the West End. And it was so moving to like see this piece of theater that's been, running for 35. I mean, it's older than me at this point. It's got to be
Yeah.
30, 35 years old. And I was like, wow, like this is something I've carried with for half of my lifetime, and it means so much. And that's really funny that you remember that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I remember specifically you and Matt in that video, and the two of you both are such incredible talents. And wow, that's so funny that that memory popped right into my head. That's
Wow.
great.
In the dorms, I'm sure we like were
Yeah.
showing it off.
Yep. Of course. That's
That's
it.
really funny.
Yeah.
Still talking about it.
Amazing. Well, let's piggyback on that question and let's talk about your number one booked it moment. Walk us through that
Mm.
day, and if the auditions and callbacks happen to be a part of it, talk about that. What was going on in your life, and what about that moment makes it your favorite booked it
Wow.
moment?
I think my favorite booked it moment was when I booked the national tour of Love Never Dies, and it was a premiere. It was a U.S. premiere that had obviously had played overseas, and they were trying to produce it in the States for many, many years. And I really booked it by chance. I was not. It was during a period in my career where I was not working with an agent, so I think I self submitted for it from like a listing I read online somewhere on a total whim for this Gangle character who's sort of the sideshow kind of master of ceremonies of this kind of haunted Coney Island circus in turn of the century New York City. And yeah, I didn't know anything about the show. I went in, I learned the material, and I actually sang for a woman, Kristen Blodgett, who is the music supervisor for all of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musicals. I don't think I really understood who she was because otherwise I would have been terrified.
Right. Sometimes it's better that way.
And yeah. I definitely went in kind of semi-blind, and I think it was just I had been in the city at this point for 6 or 7 years, and finally, I just finally was in the room for the right person for a role that honestly felt like it was tailor made for me. And I had never ever experienced anything like that before. I was always kind of trying to make myself smaller or, bigger, or how can I fit into this box? And for the first time, I was given a role that really felt like an extension of myself. And I was put through a few rounds of auditions for it, but it was pretty apparent that they were pretty interested in me from the very initial audition, which I think is also such a luxury that never ever happens, and it's always so difficult to know what direction a creative team's going to go, or you wonder, can I trust this? It feels like they're interested, but I know better than to get my hopes up. And it did wind up going through, and I received an offer for that, and I wound up doing the tour of Love Never Dies for 18 months, and we played over 400 performances, and we opened for Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it was really a remarkable experience overall.
Ah, that's fantastic. I love that story. And you said you didn't have an agent at that time?
I didn't, and that's something that's been really interesting as well. Is that I've in 10 years I've recycled a couple agents, and I've been with one at one time, and then I was unrepresented at another time. So it's funny because I think a lot of the conservatory programs teach you that you can't make it big or you can't have the success if you don't have a good agent. And I definitely am an outlier there. I definitely had the most successful professional experience of my career thus far, and I got it from a self submit. I was not represented. So I always tell that story because it's important to know that can happen.
Absolutely. Well, on top of keeping a hold of an extra 10% of your money, you
Right. Oh
also,
yeah, that part
there's
too.
that too. Well, it's such an encouraging story to share and let people know that are listening to this because if you're going to go do the New York thing, yes, people will always say you need representation. And while representation can make things a bit easier, it can save you some time because you can get yourself into appointments, especially if you don't
Mhm.
have your equity card and things like this. It's certainly not a make or break thing. And it's certainly not a reason to not move to New York
Exactly.
and pursue your dreams.
Yeah, definitely. It's not an end all. And I think that's something that I wish I had accepted earlier in my career, because it took me years and years to sort of deal with that and figure out how to get the perfect agent. And then I had a great agent, and I honestly wasn't that happy with the things I was being submitted for. So it really, there's really not a recipe for success. You really have to be pretty self directed about it, I think.
Absolutely. I think that is such great insight. And let's take a moment to talk about the present. What projects are you working on now? What are you looking forward to? And look, it's a crazy time. We are amidst this global pandemic. How do you see the industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
Oh, wow. I was actually working on a show. I was doing a production of Matilda in Asbury Park, New Jersey. I was doing the role of Mr. Wormwood right when the coronavirus really started to pick up in mid-March. And we were sent home early. It was definitely like a first for me to be told, "Hey, we're canceling the show. Go to the theater and,
Ugh.
pack up your things." It was very humbling. And it became very apparent that there was going to be a very solid amount of time where there wasn't necessarily going to be theater and the way that we are used to seeing it presented and the way that we're used to participating in it. And so I had a kind of a brief grieving period for that. And ever since, it's been honestly, I'm saying this out loud. It's been really nice. I can't lie. It's been nice to take a step away from the industry because there isn't really an industry right now. There's not really like projects to audition for and people to impress and, songs to learn. It's nice to sort of reconnect with my humanity that exists separate from theater. And I think so many of us as actors, we choose this as a life from, you know, the time we're 12 years old and we think about it every single day. And then what happens if it doesn't exist anymore? We have a total identity crisis. And I've really enjoyed sort of reconnecting with who Stephen is as just a person and not someone that is always trying to book a job. And that's sort of where I'm at. I still sing and I put a little bit of stuff on self tape, for an agent here, or I actually participated in a song fest for my Boston Conservatory voice teacher who reached out. I haven't sang for him in like 10 years. So he asked me to sing a song, and it's nice, but I'm enjoying the break from it, if I may be truly honest.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what? That has been quite a common sentiment from a lot of entertainers that I've been
I
speaking
bet.
with. And don't get me wrong, when it first happened, it was chaos. And everyone was like, "Oh no, the jobs." And as time has gone on, people have relaxed and realized they're like, "Wow, I love what I do. I love the arts, but I have been
Hmm.
hustling for a decade." And it is
Right.
nice to just go, and
Yeah.
like you said, focus on Steven, focus on yourself and
Hmm.
reground yourself. And I'm really hoping that through this and when the industry begins to come back, it's going to be such a refreshed industry.
Right.
People are going to come back with a better perspective of what it means to be a professional entertainer.
Right. And how we can bring some of this peace to, the next chapter of the industry when it's time to start hustling for a job again. Hopefully, everyone's mindset is adjusted. We'll see.
We will
Time will
indeed.
tell.
Well, it's time to move on to one of my favorite sections of the interview. I call it the Grease Lightning Round. I am going to ask you a handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after another. Are you ready?
I think I'm ready.
All right. First question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
I think some preconceived notions that I had and about the industry that I took from my undergraduate experience, and a lot of comparing and contrasting myself to other actors.
Absolutely. That comparison rabbit hole can be very dangerous.
Hmm. It's a rabbit hole.
Yep. And the second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received, and it wasn't even really advice, it was just kind of some reassurance, was actually from an actress, Karen Mason, who is a veteran actress. She played Madame Giry on Love Never Dies with me, and she has a long relationship with Andrew Lloyd Webber, and she's someone that I was, so honored to be working with. And she said to me, I was explaining to her about an experience I'd had auditioning for going to an equity chorus call, or having a sort of dehumanizing experience auditioning for the ensemble. And she just turned to me and she said, "Why are you auditioning for the ensemble? You're principal material." And I just thought to myself, wow, if Karen Mason believes that I'm good enough to be a lead, then I guess I can believe that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third question, what is something that is working for you right now? Or if you'd like to go pre COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
I think what was working for me, and something that I was really enjoying playing the role of Mr. Wormwood specifically, was just really exploring comedy and being funny and being silly and stupid, talking in ridiculous voices and kind of winging it a little bit, and not being quite so uptight, and just kind of trying to ease into being a character actor as opposed to sort of a musical theater cookie cutter type.
Yeah, and I can imagine after 400 performances of that, that you realize that you're like, wow, maybe you had a revelation. I'm envisioning this idea that you're like, I am literally just going out there and really just playing and just being so silly.
Yeah.
And I'm getting paid to do this and travel and perform to all these people. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Great. And the fourth question, what is your best resource? Whether it's a book, a movie, a YouTube, a podcast, maybe a piece of technology that you found is helping your career right now.
Well, first of all, YouTube in general is just amazing because I don't know about you, but I think you'll remember when we were coming up through the industry and we were younger and we were trying to learn, things about shows or songs, or there was no YouTube, there were no resources. So now if I, have to learn a song in 2 minutes, or I need to understand the gist of a character, I can look into a search engine and I can do a little bit of research. I don't have to go to the Boston Conservatory Library and Xerox 20 pages of music and then go and, plunk it out. So I think YouTube in general, but I will say this is a little bit of a long-winded answer for Grease Lightning, but the best memoir I've ever read by a stage actor is Time Steps by the dancer Donna McKechnie. And it's really, really enlightening about sort of what I was talking about, a career being a marathon as opposed to a race. And she talks about decades and decades of her career before, during, and after a chorus line, which is kind of what she's remembered for. Now she's in her 70s and she had incredible stories. And it was really special to read about the experience of a dancer that, kind of falls in and out of dancing. And that was a fabulous book. Everyone should read it.
Fantastic. Time Steps. Great.
Mhm.
I will have to check it out. And the fifth question, if you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in this industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently, or would you keep it the same?
Wow, I don't know if I would change anything because I think there have been difficult times and there have been confusions and frustrations. But when I look at it all in retrospect, it makes sense to me. It's like, okay, I was doing this show and then I kind of maxed out on that opportunity and I met this person and they sort of cast me in that show. And then I got my equity card and I went a period of time without working. But then on the other side of that, there was this amazing opportunity. And the ebb and flow of it is something that I can't really deny. So yeah, there's a million there's all this minutia that you'd like to think, yeah, I would have done this or I would have done that. But honestly, it's been a pretty authentic journey, I think. So I wouldn't change anything about it.
I love that. And the last question, what is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your career in this industry that you'd like to leave with everybody?
Golden nugget drop. Oh my goodness. I feel like I've shared that maybe. I think, well, one thing is definitely just to be patient with yourself and to understand that it takes a long time. Like I said, it's really takes a really long time to develop any kind of linear career progression that you can look back on and say, oh wow, like I actually achieved something. And
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic.
yeah.
And to wrap up this interview, Stephen, it is time to give yourself a plug. Where can we find you? How do our listeners connect with you? Is there anything you want to promote?
Oh my goodness. You can find me on Instagram. That's kind of like the center of my sphere of social media activity, and any updates about what's going on with my career or my art is probably going to be posted there. So it's at Stephen Petrovich, just one word, and it's StephenPetrovich.
Perfect. And for everyone listening, I have put the link to his Instagram in the description of this episode, so you can easily click that and connect. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been so great to speak with you and to catch up.
So good to reconnect. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My one call to action for you is to go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join our free email community, where we dig deep into a continually growing resource of truly actionable things you can be doing right now to help advance your entertainment career. Don't miss an episode. We have a new guest 7 days a week. Search for You Booked It on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app and subscribe today. All the best to you. We'll see you tomorrow.